Earth sent Garrett Thorne, 58 years old, retired, armed with 3 magazines and a wrench. In 72 hours, he became the ghost that broke an empire. They thought it was suicide. They were wrong. This is how it began. The war room floated above a dying world. High Arbiter Kelrax stood at the center of the Hall of Concordance, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting the light of 17 fallen stars. Each holographic projection showed another system consumed, another billion souls under Imperium control. The math was simple, brutal, impossible. 3,000 capital ships, Kelrax said. His voice carried the harmonic resonance of his species, each word layered with frequencies human ears couldn't fully process. Minimum force projection required to counter Imperium fleet strength in the occupied sectors. The assembled delegates shifted. Chitin scraped against stone. Membranes fluttered in recycled air. Projected troop deployment for planetary liberation, Kelrax continued. 12 billion across 6 species. He paused, let the number settle like lead. Expected casualties, 42%. Silence filled the chamber, the kind of silence that precedes surrender. A Vraxian observer pulsed bioluminescence patterns of distress rippling across translucent skin. We do not possess such numbers. Not in 10 cycles. Not in 20. Then we negotiate terms. This from a Korvathi delegate, mandibles clicking with resignation. Preserve what systems we can. Accept Imperium governance in the outer territories. Accept slavery, you mean? Kelrax's exoskeleton darkened crystalline facets shifting to deep crimson. He had worn Imperium chains once, 15 years mining stellarium in the dark. He still felt the weight, some nights phantom shackles on limbs long free. We lack alternatives, the Korvathi said, not cruel, not just stating fact. The chamber doors opened. A single human entered. He wore the dark uniform of Earth's Strategic Command, no decoration except a silver star over his left chest. His posture was straight but not rigid. Gray threaded his close-cropped hair. He carried no data slates, brought no aids. His face was weathered in a way that spoke of years under open sky, not climate-controlled stations. General Silas Cordovan, Kelrax said, Earth is representative. We await confirmation of your mobilization commitment. Cordovan walked to the center projection, studying the cascading system maps with eyes that had seen invasions before. Plan them. Survive them. Earth will deploy one asset, he said. The chamber stilled. Kelrax waited for clarification. His species had learned patience from stone, but even stone had limits. Clarify fleet designation, Kelrax said carefully. No fleet. The Vraxian's bioluminescence flickered uncertainty. A special operations division then. Battalion strength. One operator, Cordovan said. Call sign Flint. The words hung in recycled air like a detonation waiting to happen. One biological soldier. Kelrax processed the translation twice. His exoskeleton shifted through the spectrum crimson to amber to colors humans had no names for. Is this symbolic support? No. This a reconnaissance prior to full mobilization? No. A Korvathi delegate rose mandibles spread wide in a display of aggression. The Imperium controls 17 systems. Their garrisons number in the billions. Orbital batteries encircle every strategic world. You mock this council with, we've been studying Imperium architecture for 8 years. Cordovan's voice never rose. Didn't need to. Captured tech from the Denebraid, intercepted transmissions, defector interviews. He glanced at Kelrax. The Talkesh Arbiter had provided those interviews, paid for them in nightmares. We know their weakness. Flint knows how to exploit it. One human ended the siege at Kandahar Station, Cordovan said. One human held the breach at New Mombasa for 4 days. One human navigated the asteroid field at Titan's Gate when navigation systems failed and brought 300 souls home. He paused. That human is Garrett Thorne, and he's already on his way. Kelrax studied the general. Humans were difficult to read, their faces too mobile, too many micro-expressions his species had never evolved to interpret. But he'd learned one thing in his years among them. When they spoke with that particular quietness, they meant every word. What is his mission? Kelrax asked. Ghost Protocol, Cordovan said. Make the Imperium think Nexus Ardent is compromised with biological contamination. Their response will be automatic isolation to prevent spread. When Ardent severs from the fleet network, their coordination collapses. And if he fails, Cordovan met Kelrax's multifaceted gaze without flinching. He won't. The statement was recorded in full. Outside, the Hall Coalition analysts debated whether Earth had misjudged the scale of the war. Some believed it was arrogance. Others believed it was desperation. A few considered the possibility that Earth understood something the rest did not. Montana in autumn. The mountains wore gold like a crown, aspen leaves trembling in wind that tasted of snow still weeks away. The survival school sat in a valley carved by glaciers surrounded by pines that had watched centuries pass. Garrett Thorne knelt in pine needles teaching a 12-year-old girl how to start fire without matches. Friction, he said. His voice was gravel-worn smooth, the kind earned from years of shouting orders and breathing dust. You can have all the tech in the world, satellites, drones, fancy equipment, but when systems fail, you fall back on fundamentals. The girl worked the bow drill, tongue caught between teeth in concentration. Smoke curled. Thorne nodded approval. That's it. Steady pressure. Don't rush. He sat back on his heels, knees protesting the position. 58 felt different than 28, but the skills remained. Fire's not just heat, it's hope. Long as you can make flame, you can survive another day. The ember co-op. The girl's face lit up brighter than the tiny coal glowing in tinder. I did it? You did. Thorne stood, joints popping in sequence like small arms fire. Remember this feeling. Day comes when everything's gone wrong. When you're cold and scared and alone, you'll remember you made fire once. Means you can do it again. Other students worked through scenarios scattered across the property. Building shelters, purifying water, reading terrain. Skills Thorne had learned in deserts and jungles, mountains and cities. Skills that had kept him breathing when better men died. His phone vibrated. Encrypted signature. He'd been waiting for it. Keep practicing, he told the girl. I'll be back. He walked to the main lodge, boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. Inside, he locked the door and accepted the call. General Cordovin's face filled the screen. No preamble, no small talk. They'd known each other too long for that. Need you for one last op, Cordovin said. Thorne was already shaking his head. I'm retired Silas, 4 years now, teaching kids how to not die in the woods. I know, wouldn't ask if there was another option. There's always another option. You've got operators half my age with twice my speed. Don't need speed, need experience. Need someone who survived 4 days behind enemy lines in Mogadishu with a broken leg and a jammed rifle. Cordovin leaned forward. Need someone who improvises when the plan goes to hell, because the plan always goes to hell. Thorne sat down heavily. Through the window, he could see the mountains. Peaceful, safe. The life he'd built after the uniforms and the funerals, and the nights that still woke him at 0300 with phantom gunfire in his ears. What's the mission? Cordovin told him. Thorne listened without interrupting. His face showed nothing, an old skill learned in briefings where showing doubt could cost lives. When Cordovin finished, Thorne was quiet for a long moment. You're sending me alone into a station with billions of hostiles armed with what exactly? Standard loadout, 3 magazines, breaching tools, thermite paste, contamination markers. No extraction plan. Extraction plan is you make it 72 hours and get yourself to an emergency pod. Stealth retrieval craft will be positioned at extreme distance. If you're positioned, Cordovin agreed. Thorne rubbed his face. Stubble rasped against calloused palms. Why me, Silas, really? Because you'll do what needs doing, and you won't quit when it gets hard. Cordovin's expression softened just a fraction. Because in Mogadishu, when command said abort, you said negative. When they said the mission was compromised, you said the mission was everyone getting home. And you got them home. Lost 3 good people doing it. Saved 297. Thorne stood, walked to the window. The mountains looked different now. Already receding, becoming memory. I've got a daughter in the Air Force, he said quietly. Emma, 28, stationed at Forward Base Kepler. I know, Kepler's in the buffer zone, 3 systems from Imperium Advance. If they push further, Emma's in the path. Cordovin didn't look away. This stops that push. Thorne closed his eyes, saw Emma at 7 learning to ride a bike, at 17 enlisting despite his protests, at 28 wearing the uniform with the same stubborn pride he'd once carried. He opened his eyes. When do I leave? Transport's waiting at Malmstrom. You've got 6 hours to get there. Thorne ended the call, stood in silence for a moment that stretched. Then he moved. Muscle memory, old routines surfacing like sharks from deep water. He packed light. The go bag was already prepped, had been for 4 years. Some habits you don't break. Spare clothes, medical kit, photos in a waterproof case. His wedding ring on a chain worn smooth from years of touch. Sarah had died in a car accident 6 years ago. Some drunk kid texting instead of watching the road. Thorne had been overseas. Got the call 3 days after she was already in the ground. The ring was all he had left except memories and Emma. He recorded a message on his personal device. Encrypted. Timed release if he didn't check in every 24 hours. Emma. His voice caught. He cleared his throat, tried again. Emma, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it back. Want you to know I love you. Always have. Always will. He paused. You're braver than I ever was. Smarter, too. Your mother's spirit and your father's stubbornness. The world's lucky to have you. He almost deleted it, almost convinced himself he'd be fine, no need for melodrama. But Somalia had taught him better. Mogadishu had taught him things he'd never wanted to learn. Sometimes you don't come home. He saved the message, set the timer, grabbed the bag. Outside, the students had moved to hand-to-hand drills. They saw him with the pack and went quiet. The 12-year-old girl who'd made fire walked over. You leaving, Mr. Thorne? Got called away. Emergency. When you coming back? He knelt down, meeting her eyes. Don't know, but you remember what I taught you. Fire, shelter, water, mindset. Those 4 things you can survive anything. Even space aliens. Despite everything, he smiled. Even space aliens. She hugged him quick and fierce. He hugged back, thinking of Emma. Then he stood shoulder to the pack and walked to his truck. The mountains watched him leave. Malmstrom Air Force Base smelled like jet fuel and purpose. Thorne cleared security and was escorted directly to a hangar that officially didn't exist. Inside, technicians swarmed a matte black transport that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed stealth was a religion. Cordovan waited beside a sealed equipment case. Your loadout, he said. Familiarize yourself during transit. Flight time to the rendezvous point is 40 hours. Thorne opened the case. Standard rifle. Accurized, well-maintained, the kind of weapon you could trust when everything else failed. 3 30-round magazines. 180 degrees of bad news for anyone on the receiving end. Thermite paste in unmarked tubes, breaching charges, signal disruptors, a compact propulsion rig for maneuvering in zero-G, and a dozen small devices that look like nothing special. Contamination markers, Cordovan explained. Plant these in key locations throughout Arden. They emit a biosignature that mimics a Class 7 pathogen. Imperium protocol mandates automatic isolation when contamination reaches 75% of relay nodes. How many nodes? 18 for full coverage. Thorne did the math. 72 hours, 18 locations, billions of hostiles, no backup. This is a suicide mission, he said. Yep. And you figure I'm dumb enough to take it. Cordovan almost smiled. Figure you're committed enough. A technician approached. General, we're ready for final brief. They moved to a secure room where holographic projections showed Nexus Arden in rotating detail. The station was massive, a geometric nightmare of interlocking modules and weapon arrays. Home to billions, heart of Imperium coordination. Ardent is more than a command hub, Cordovan said. It's their academy, leadership training, strategic planning, cultural indoctrination. He highlighted sections of the structure. These wings house educational facilities. Imperium brings their best and brightest here, shapes them into the officers who will lead their expansion for the next century. Thorne studied the layout. There's kids in there. Families, too. Officers' dependents. Civilian support staff. Triggering full contamination protocol would kill thousands of non-combatants. Yes. Cordovan met his eyes. That's why you're not triggering full protocol. You're triggering selective isolation. Military sectors only. Intel said 18 nodes for full coverage. Intel was incomplete. We got updated data from a defector. Cordovan pulled up a new schematic. Kelrak's intelligence purchased with nightmares. There's a way to isolate just the military network. Requires precision placement. 24 nodes instead of 18. And you'll need this. He handed Thorne a data chip no bigger than a fingernail. What is it? Code that shouldn't exist. Written by someone who helped design Arden's architecture when they were a prisoner. Someone who's been waiting 15 years for a chance to hit back. Cordovan's voice was quiet. When you reach the primary relay junction, this code separates civilian systems from military coordination. Clean surgical strike instead of genocide. Thorne turned the chip over in his fingers. So small, so much weight. Who's the defector? High Arbiter Kelrax, Talkesh species, crystalline exoskeleton, about 8 feet tall, looks like living quartz. He'll be monitoring your mission from Coalition Command. He know I'm going in. He's the one who requested you specifically. Said humans have a particular talent for impossible operations. We're too dumb to quit. His words were admirable persistence in the face of logical futility. I'm paraphrasing. Despite the weight of what was coming, Thorne huffed a laugh. When do I depart? 30 minutes. Transport will take you to the Kuiper staging area. From there, you insert via one-man pod. Coalition forces will be positioning for opportunistic strikes once Ardent's coordination fails. And if I'm captured, don't be. Thorne nodded, started to leave. Flint. He turned. Cordovan had used his call sign. That meant something. I know what I'm asking, Cordovan said. 72 hours alone in hell. No extraction guarantee. Odds that would make any sane person walk away. He paused. But I also know you. Know you'll find a way, because you always do. Or die trying. Or die trying, Cordovan agreed. But you won't. You're too stubborn. Thorne thought of Emma, thought of the mountains, thought of the 12-year-old girl making fire. See you in 3 days, he said. He boarded the transport. The engine spun up with a sound like distant thunder. Thorne strapped into the acceleration couch and felt the familiar weight as they lifted. Through the small viewport, Montana shrank. The survival school became a dot, then nothing. He was alone with the stars in the mission and his thoughts. 40 hours to rendezvous. He spent them memorizing Ardent's layout until he could navigate blind, studied patrol patterns, logged energy fluctuations, calculated timing windows. The work was meditative, familiar. This he understood. Planning was certainty, execution was chaos. But if you planned well enough, chaos became manageable. He disassembled and reassembled his rifle 17 times, checked each round, tested the thermite paste on a scrap panel. The stuff burned hot and clean, melting through composite armor like butter. Good for breaching, better for making Imperium think system malfunctions were causing the contamination readings. The propulsion rig was elegant, minimal signature, enough delta for precise maneuvering. He ran through simulated approaches until the controls felt like extensions of his body. And he thought about Emma, thought about the message waiting in encrypted storage, thought about not coming home. He'd faced death before, made peace with it in Mogadishu, lying in a ditch with compound fracture and the sounds of approaching hostiles. But this felt different. This felt like choosing. You didn't have to go, a voice whispered. Could have said no, stayed in Montana, let someone else be the hero. But Emma was at Forward Base Kepler. And if the Imperium wasn't stopped, Kepler was next. Emma was next. So really there'd never been a choice at all. The transport dropped him at the Kuiper staging area 40 hours after departure. A small facility, barely more than a dock and a fuel depot. The insertion pod waited like a coffin with engines. No ceremony, no speeches. A technician ran final systems check while Thorne suited up. Standard EVA gear reinforced at stress points. Helmet with heads-up display. Life support good for 96 hours if he was careful. You're clear for departure, the technician said. Young kid, couldn't be more than 25. Good luck, sir. Thorne nodded, sealed the helmet, climbed into the pod. The interior was cramped, designed for efficiency, not comfort. He strapped in and ran through the pre-launch checklist with the kind of focus that had kept him alive through 30 years of situations that should have killed him. Systems green, navigation locked, target acquisition confirmed. Flint, this is Cordovan. You reading me? 5 by 5. Godspeed, Marine. The pod launched. G-forces pressed Thorne into the couch like a giant's hand. Then weightlessness. Then the vast silence of space. He was alone now. Truly alone. Millions of miles from Montana. From Emma. From anything resembling safety. The pod's navigation system guided him through the approach vector. 6 hours of drift toward Ardent's debris field. No active propulsion. Just momentum and prayer. Through the small viewport, he could see the station growing. Nexus Ardent, vast and geometric, layered with weapon arrays and shield emitters. Lights blazed across its hull like a city that never slept. Home to billions. Heart of an empire. And Garrett Thorne was about to walk through its front door. He checked his watch. Hour 12 of the mission. 60 hours remaining. The debris field loomed, chunks of shattered ships and spent ordnance, the graveyard of 1,000 battles. Thorne used the propulsion rig to match velocity with the tumbling wreckage, made himself part of the chaos. Imperium sensors swept the field constantly, looking for fleet-scale threats, capital ships, fighter squadrons, invasion forces. They weren't looking for one old man tumbling with the trash. He drifted for 2 hours patient as stone, watching, learning the rhythm of sensor sweeps, counting seconds between passes. At hour 14, he saw his window, a maintenance conduit, external access point, shield fluctuation cycle that lasted 3 seconds. He needed 2. Thorne engaged the propulsion rig, silent thrust, minimal signature. He crossed the gap like a ghost magnetic clamps extending. Contact. He attached to the hull just as the shield cycle completed. Alarms didn't trigger, sensors didn't flag. To Arden's vast network, he was just another piece of debris that had gotten caught on the exterior. Thorne pulled out the thermite paste, applied it to the conduit seal with practiced precision. The burn would be slow, controlled, would look like system degradation, not infiltration. While the thermite worked, he planted the first contamination marker in a hull crack. The device activated silently, broadcasting its false biosignature into Arden's monitoring systems. 1 of 24, 23 to go. The thermite finished. The seal melted through. Thorne opened the conduit and slipped inside. He was in. Hour 18. The corridors of Nexus Arden stretched in every direction, vast and industrial. Lighting was harsh, optimized for Imperium visual spectrum. Everything was angles and efficiency. No wasted space, no comfort. Thorne moved through maintenance shafts barely large enough for his frame. Used conduits meant for automated repair drones. Stayed out of sight. Stay quiet. Stay alive. He could hear the station around him. Hum of environmental systems. Vibration of massive engines. Voices in languages his translator couldn't decipher. The sounds of billions living their lives unaware that death walked among them. He planted Marker 2 in a ventilation junction. Marker 3 near a power relay. Moving with purpose but without haste. Each placement calculated. Each route memorized. At hour 20, he reached a wider corridor. Had to cross. No way around. He waited. Listened. Counted footsteps. Patrol passed. Thorne crossed in the gap between sweeps. Almost made it. Almost. A door opened. An Imperium officer stepped through, tall armored weapon at ready. They locked eyes. For a frozen moment, neither moved. Then the officer reached for his communicator. Thorne was faster. He closed the distance in 3 strides, knocked the communicator from the officer's hand, swept his legs. The Imperium hit the deck hard. Thorne's knee found his chest. His knife found his throat. "Don't," Thorne said quietly. The officer stared up at him, fear in alien eyes, human eyes. All eyes looked the same when they were afraid. Thorne could kill him, should kill him. One witness was one too many. But the officer was young, barely older than Emma. "I'm going to let you go," Thorne said. "Going to walk away. You're going to count to 100, then you're going to report a malfunction. System glitch, not an intruder. Understand?" The officer nodded frantically. "Good." Thorne stood, backed away. 100, slow. He disappeared into the shadows. Behind him he heard counting, shaky, in a language he didn't speak. But numbers were universal. Thorne moved faster now. Planted Marker 5. Marker 6. The contamination readings would be spreading through Arden's systems. Subtle, growing. Not enough to trigger protocols yet, but building. He reached a viewing portal and stopped. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see a section of the station he hadn't expected. Children. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Young Imperium small bodies in uniform learning mathematics or history or whatever empires taught their youth. A teacher at the front. Students listening with the universal posture of bored kids everywhere. One small Imperium caught him staring, tilted its head, curious. Thorne raised a hand, a small wave. The child waved back. He moved on. But the image stayed with him, burned into his mind like the thermite he'd used on the hull. This wasn't just a military target. Cordovan had said as much. But seeing it was different. Seeing children waving was different. He thought of the 12-year-old girl making fire. Thought of Emma at that age. Thought of every kid who'd ever looked at the world with wonder instead of weapons. Hour 22. Thorne planted Marker 9 near what his blueprints labeled as Educational Wing 3. Could hear laughter through the walls, kids being kids even here, even in the heart of an empire. His communicator vibrated, encrypted signal from Coalition Command. He found a quiet alcove and accepted. "Flint, this is Kelrax." The voice was layered harmonic. "The Talkesh Arbiter. I am monitoring your progress. Contamination markers are registering. Well done." Saw something you didn't mention in the briefing, Thorne said quietly. The Academy wings. Yeah, lots of kids. Silence on the line. Then, I was educated here, before my capture. Before 15 years in stellarium mines. Kelrax's voice carried weight Thorne recognized. Trauma. I know what you are seeing, I know what you are feeling. Triggering full protocol kills them, which is why you have my code. Why you will plant 24 markers instead of 18. Why this mission is about precision, not destruction. Pause. I will not have more Imperium children orphaned, even if their empire killed my own family. Thorne absorbed that. You sure this code works? I wrote portions of Arden's architecture. I know its bones. Kelrax's harmonics shifted something like grim determination. Plant the markers. Upload the code when you reach primary relay junction. The separation will be clean. Military network isolated. Civilian systems untouched. And if it doesn't work, then I have killed thousands of children, and I will spend what remains of my life answering for that. Another pause. But it will work. It must. No pressure, Thorne muttered. Flint. Kelrax's voice softened. What you are doing, one human alone trying to save both sides. This is why I requested you. Why I believe in your species. We're not special, just too stubborn to quit. Stubbornness is a form of courage, perhaps the truest form. The line went dead. Thorne sat in the alcove for a moment. Let the weight of it settle. Then he stood. Work to do. Kids to save. He moved deeper into Arden. The station was a labyrinth. Corridors that twisted and turned, levels that stacked vertically and horizontally in defiance of easy navigation. But Thorne had memorized the maps, knew where he was going. Marker 12 went into a server junction. Marker 13 near auxiliary power. 14 at a communications relay. He was careful, methodical, each placement perfect, each route calculated to minimize exposure. But at hour 26 his luck ran out. Alarms shrieked to life, red lights flashed. Imperium voices shouted in languages that needed no translation. Alert, intruder, lockdown. Thorne ran, doors slammed shut ahead of him. Behind him, sealing corridors and automated response. He slid under one just before it completed its cycle. Kept moving, heavy footsteps, getting closer. Imperium security teams mobilizing. He couldn't fight them all, couldn't even fight a fraction. He ducked into a side passage, planted marker 15 while he had the chance. The contamination signature pulsed. Another node active. Voices grew louder. They were sweeping sections. Professional, coordinated. Thorne found a ventilation shaft, barely wide enough. He squeezed in, pulled the grate closed behind him, held his breath. Imperium soldiers passed below, armor clanking, weapons charged. Section 8 clear. Moving to Section 9. They moved on. Thorne waited 5 minutes. 10. When silence returned, he emerged. Hour 28. He was running out of time. 16 markers left to plant. 44 hours remaining. And now Ardent was on alert. But Garrett Thorne had operated in hostile territory before. Had learned in deserts and jungles that the key to survival wasn't speed. It was patience. He slowed down, moved with deliberate care, used the chaos of the alert to his advantage. Security teams were looking for intruders. He moved like he belonged. Marker 16, 17, 18. At hour 30, he reached Educational Wing 7. Through another viewport, he saw more children, these ones younger, playing in a common area, building structures with colored blocks, universal games. One child looked up, saw him. Thorne froze. The child stared. Thorne stared back. Then the child smiled, held up its block creation. Proud, Thorne gave a thumbs up. The child went back to playing. He moved on. But something had shifted in him. These weren't the enemy. These were just kids, born into an empire they didn't choose, learning what they were taught, playing with blocks, just like Emma had once played. Like the girl in Montana making fire. He planted marker 19 with extra care, made sure the biosignature was precise. When Kelrax's code activated, these wings would be protected. Had to be. Hour 32, halfway through the mission, more than halfway through marker placement. Thorne allowed himself a moment of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe he'd get all 24 markers planted. Maybe Kelrax's code would function as promised. Maybe the floor beneath him exploded, not literally, but close. Emergency bulkheads slammed down. The corridor he was in sealed at both ends. Lights went from red to orange to a sickly green that meant biohazard protocols. A voice boomed through speakers. Imperium language, but the translator in his helmet caught enough. Contamination detected. Section 14 entering quarantine. All personnel evacuate to designated safe zones. Thorne looked at the marker he'd just planted. The biosignature was working. Too well. Ardent was responding to the threat he'd created. Isolating sections early, protecting itself. He needed to keep moving. Needed to plant the remaining markers before the station locked down completely. But the bulkheads were sealed. He was trapped. He looked up. Maintenance shaft. Always a maintenance shaft. He climbed. The shaft was tight, cramped. His armor scraped against metal. But he pushed through, emerged 3 levels up. Outside the quarantine zone, security teams rushed past. He pressed himself flat against the wall. Let them pass. When clear, he moved. Marker 20, 21, 22, hour 36. He was close to the primary relay junction, the location where he'd upload Kelrax's code. 2 markers remained after that. Then the mission would be complete. Thorne reached the junction, a massive chamber filled with data conduits and power relays. The neural center of Arden's coordination network. He pulled out the data chip. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. He found the access port, slotted the chip. Code began uploading. Progress bar crept across his helmet display. 15%, 20, 30. Footsteps behind him. Thorne spun, hand on his rifle. An Imperium officer stood in the doorway. Not the young one from before. This one was older, armored in plates that looked like they'd seen combat. Weapon raised. "You," the officer said. The translator made the voice flat, emotionless. "The contamination source." Thorne kept his rifle lowered. Not contamination, just chemistry and clever programming. "You sabotage our station." "I'm ending a war." The officer tilted its head, considering. The weapon didn't lower. "You are one human, alone in the heart of Imperium power." The officer's voice carried something like curiosity. "Why?" "Because someone had to. Many someones could, many with fleets, armies, power." The officer stepped closer. "But Earth sent you. Alone. This is foolish." "Yeah, we're good at foolish." Thorne watched the progress bar. 60%. "But we're better at stubborn. You will fail." "Maybe, but I'll try anyway." The upload hit 80%. The officer's weapon trembled. Not fear, something else. "There are children in this station." "I know, I've seen them." "You would kill them." "No." Thorne met the officer's gaze. "I'd die before I let that happen. That's why the code I'm uploading only isolates military networks. Civilian wings stay protected. Kids stay safe." The officer was silent. The weapon lowered, just a fraction. "You protect our young while sabotaging our fleet coordination. Wars between soldiers, not kids." 95%. "I have offspring," the officer said quietly, "in educational Wing 12. Then you understand." 100%. Upload complete. The officer raised his weapon again, but didn't fire. "I will give you 30 seconds. Then I sound the alarm." "That's all I need." Thorne grabbed his rifle and ran. Behind him, alarms blared, but he had his 30 seconds. He planted marker 23 in a coolant junction. Marker 24 near the command corps' outer defense perimeter. Hour 38. All markers planted. Code uploaded. Mission complete. Now he just had to survive and get the hell out. Garrett Thorne ran through corridors that pulsed with alarm lights. Behind him, Imperium security teams mobilized with the efficiency of a hive responding to invasion. Ahead, automated bulkheads slammed down in sequence trying to cage him. He wouldn't be caged. Hour 39. The contamination markers were all planted. Kelrax's code was uploaded. The biosignatures spread through Arden's monitoring systems like fire through dry brush. Subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. But mission completion meant nothing if he died in these steel corridors. Thorne ducked into a maintenance passage as boots thundered past. Heavy, armored. The Imperium didn't send their standard patrols now. They sent hunters. His communicator crackled. Cordovan's voice distorted by distance and interference. Flint Coalition sensors are picking up activity. Imperium fleet movements becoming erratic. Something's working. "Markers are active," Thorne said quietly. "Codes uploaded. Now I just need to not die." "Copy that. Stealth retrieval is positioning. Get to an emergency pod, any pod. We'll track your beacon." Easier said than done. When has anything been easy with you? Fair point. Thorne killed the calm. Listen. The station breathed around him. Ventilation systems, power conduits, the endless hum of billions living in manufactured atmosphere, and footsteps, getting closer. He moved deeper into the maintenance levels. These passages were smaller, tighter, built for automated drones, not organic beings. His armor scraped against walls. But Imperium soldiers in their rigid plating would have it worse. Small advantages. You took them where you found them. Hour 40. His suit's life support indicators showed oxygen at 73%, water at 60, power reserves good for another 50 hours if he was careful. The numbers were abstract, clinical. They didn't account for exhaustion, didn't measure the weight of 40 hours without real sleep. But Thorne had learned in deserts and mountains that the body could be pushed, could be made to function when the mind said quit. Pain was temporary, dead was permanent. He kept moving. The passage opened into a vertical shaft. Ladders extended up and down into darkness. Thorne checked his internal map. Up led toward outer hull sections, possible pod access. Down led deeper into the station's guts. He went up, hand over hand, rung after rung. The ladder was designed for Imperium physiology. The spacing felt wrong. His shoulders protested. His knees ached with the kind of pain that said 58 wasn't 28. He climbed anyway. At the third level, he heard voices. Imperium soldiers. 2 of them. Checking the passage above. Thorne froze. Held position. His arms trembled with the effort. Below 100-foot drop to deck plating that wouldn't forgive mistakes. Above hostiles with weapons. The voices continued. Casual conversation. Something about duty rotations. Ration schedules. The mundane concerns of soldiers everywhere. They moved on. Thorne resumed climbing, reached the upper level, emerged into a corridor that looked like every other corridor. Utilitarian, harsh lighting, no identifying markers. But his internal compass said he was moving toward the outer hull, toward escape. Hour 42. He found an observation deck. Empty. Viewports showed the black of space and the distant lights of coalition ships maintaining perimeter. So far away. Might as well have been in another galaxy. Movement in his peripheral vision. Thorne spun, rifle up. An Imperium engineer stood frozen, unarmed, holding diagnostic equipment. Young, barely more than a kid. Its exoskeleton was lighter than combat armor, designed for precision work, not war. They stared at each other. The engineer's eyes went to Thorne's rifle, to the human patch on his shoulder. Recognition dawned. You're the contamination source, it said. The translator gave the voice a trembling quality. I'm the guy trying to end a war, Thorne replied, by sabotaging life support. By isolating military networks, civilians stay safe. That includes you. The engineer's manipulator appendages flexed, fear response. I should report you. Yeah, you should. Thorne didn't lower the rifle, but he didn't aim it either. Question is whether you will. The engineer looked at its diagnostic equipment, at Thorne, at the viewports showing distant coalition ships. Educational Wing 12, it said quietly. My offspring, learning mathematics. I was checking environmental systems for that sector when alarms triggered. Wing 12's on the civilian network. My code protects it. Your kid's safe. You lie. Why would I? You think I want to kill children? Thorne lowered his rifle. I've got a daughter, 28, Air Force, stationed 3 systems from here. I'm doing this so she stays safe. So your kid stays safe. So maybe kids on both sides stop losing parents. The engineer was quiet, processing. The contamination, it said. It's false signature. Biochemical mimicry. Yeah. Clever. Will trigger auto-isolation without actual pathogen risk. The engineer tilted its head. Military strategists would not think of this. 2, indirect. I'm not a strategist. I'm just a mechanic who learned to fight. You fight by not fighting. I fight by making the other side think they need to protect themselves from something that isn't real. Thorne gestured to the viewports. Your fleet coordinators are about to lose connection to Arden. They'll fragment, lose cohesion. Coalition forces will exploit gaps, and the war ends without billions dying. The engineer looked at its equipment again. At readouts Thorne couldn't interpret. Isolation protocol approaching threshold, it said. Another 6 contamination markers and automatic response triggers. It met Thorne's gaze. You already planted 6 more than required. Redundancy, in case some didn't take. All 24 are broadcasting. The engineer's appendages stilled. You are thorough. I'm old. Old means experienced. Experience means you plan for failure. Silence stretched between them. Outside the viewports, stars wheeled in their ancient dance. There is a faster route to emergency pod stations, the engineer said finally. Service corridor, maintenance access only, I could show you. Why would you do that? Because you gave me choice. You could have killed me. Instead, you explained. The engineer gestured with its equipment. And because my offspring deserves to grow up in galaxy where humans and Imperium find better ways than war. Thorne studied the engineer, saw no deception, just another parent trying to protect their kid. Show me, he said. They moved through corridors together, an unlikely pair, human and Imperium, saboteur and engineer. The engineer led with quick efficiency using access codes to bypass sealed doors. What's your name? Thorne asked. Zek. My designation is Zek 7749 Tertiary. But, Zek. Garrett Thorne, people call me Flint. Flint, like stone that makes fire. Something like that. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Zek checked a wall panel. Security teams ahead. Heavy patrol. It looked at Thorne. I can create distraction, draw them to maintenance, emergency, and adjacent sector. You do that, you're helping me, helping an enemy saboteur. Yes, Zek's voice carried something like resolution. But you helped me first, by protecting my offspring. Debts must be answered. Before Thorne could respond, Zek triggered something on its panel. Alarms blared in a distant corridor. Voices shouted. Boots pounded in that direction. The junction cleared. Go, Zek said. Pod stations are through that passage. 200 meters. You will find access. They'll know you helped. Perhaps, perhaps not. I am engineer. Accidents happen. Something like a smile in Zek's posture. Go, before I change mine and remember duty. Thorne nodded once, started to move. Flint, he turned. Tell your daughter, Zek said. Tell her there are Imperium who want peace too, who are tired of conquest, who want our offspring to build instead of destroy. I'll tell her. Thorne ran. Behind him he heard Zek manipulating controls, creating more false emergencies, drawing security away. One engineer, one parent, choosing different side. Small choices. They added up. Hour 45. Thorne reached the pod station, a bay with 50 emergency evacuation pods locked in their cradles, designed for rapid deployment. Quick escape when everything went wrong. Everything had definitely gone wrong. He approached the nearest pod, started the initialization sequence. Alarms shrieked, not general alarms. These were specific, targeted. Someone had realized an enemy combatant was at the pod bay. Thorne worked faster. His fingers flew over the control panel. The pod hummed to life. Hatches unsealed. Boots in the corridor. Heavy. Close. The pod door opened. Thorne turned. 6 Imperium soldiers blocked the exit. Weapons raised. Armored. Professional. At the center stood someone different. Taller. Heavier armor. Insignia that marked rank. Command authority. Human, the commander said. The translator made the voice deep. Resonant. You have led impressive chase. But it ends now. Thorne's hand rested on his rifle. 6 against 1. He might take 2, maybe 3. Then they'd cut him down. I don't suppose you'd accept my surrender, he said. We would, but you would not offer it genuinely. The commander tilted its armored head. You are special operations. I recognize tactics, recognize training. It gestured. I am Supreme Commander Vraxis, Ardent's military authority, and you are Garrett Thorne, retired Marine, currently employed in making your day worse. Something like amusement in Vraxis's posture. You have succeeded admirably. Contamination protocols approaching threshold. My fleet coordinators report communication degradation. My security teams chase shadows. It stepped closer. One human, achieving what coalition fleets could not. I am impressed. Thanks. Can I go now? No, figured. Vraxis gestured. Soldiers moved forward. Thorne didn't fight, no point. He'd completed the mission, markers planted, code uploaded. If they captured him now, the protocol would still trigger. The fleet would still fracture. He'd done what he came to do. They disarmed him, removed his rifle, his sidearm, his combat knife, his tools, left him in just the EVA suit. You will accompany me to Command Corps, Vraxis said. I wish to understand what humans saw in this mission. What made Earth send one elderly soldier instead of fleets? I'm not that old. You show gray in your hair. Your movements favor injured limbs. You have lived decades. Vraxis started walking. Soldiers flanked Thorn. In Imperium culture, age means wisdom, experience. You were chosen for reason. They moved through corridors that grew wider, more ornate. This was command territory, where decisions were made, where wars were won and lost. Your contamination signatures, Vraxis continued, they are false. Biochemical mimicry designed to trigger our isolation protocols. You figured that out. Eventually, after considerable analysis, they entered an elevator, began ascending. But by then your 24 markers were already active. Removing them requires time we do not have. The threshold will be reached regardless. That was the idea. Elegant strategy. Use our own caution against us. Make us protect ourselves from threat that does not exist. The elevator climbed. This is not typical military doctrine. This is asymmetric thinking. I'm a mechanic. Mechanics solve problems with what's available. Sometimes that's a wrench. Sometimes it's psychology. The elevator opened. The command core was vast. Holographic displays showed fleet positions across 17 systems, thousands of data streams, billions of calculations. The nervous system of an empire, and in the center Vraxis's command station. Observe, Vraxis said. One of the holograms showed contamination levels, red markers spreading like infection. 24 nodes, all active, all broadcasting, threshold 75%, current level 74%, hour 48. 1% from automatic isolation, Vraxis said quietly. You planned for failure, accepted possibility of capture or death, yet still ensured mission success. I'm old. Old means you've seen plans fail, so you build in backup. Wisdom. Vraxis studied the displays. My fleet coordination is already degrading. Minor delays, communication lag. When isolation triggers Arden severs from all external networks. My fleets operate autonomously, without centralized strategy. And coalition forces exploit the gaps. Yes, Vraxis was quiet for a moment. You have defeated an empire with chemistry and code. One human, no army, no fleet. Its armored head turned. Why? Because someone had to. Because my daughter's stationed in your advanced path. Because kids on both sides deserve better than endless war. Thorn met Vraxis's gaze. Because I can. So I did. Vraxis made a sound the translator couldn't interpret. In Imperium culture, it said slowly, there is concept, Kelthar, means warrior who fights with honor, who shows strength not through destruction, but through precision. It gestured to the displays. You infiltrated our heart, could have planted explosives, could have killed thousands. Instead, you targeted only military coordination, preserved civilian life. Kids are kids, doesn't matter whose side they're on. Kelthar, Vraxis repeated, you are Kelthar Garrett Thorn. Before Thorn could respond, alarms shrieked. The contamination display flared red. Threshold reached 75%. Protocol auto-isolation initiated. The command core shuddered. Throughout Arden bulkheads slammed down. Network connections severed. The vast station began sealing itself away from the galaxy it had controlled. On the displays, fleet coordination collapsed. Ships that had moved in perfect synchronization now drifted, waited for orders that wouldn't come. Coalition forces appeared at the edges of multiple systems. Opportunistic strikes, exploiting the chaos. Vraxis watched its empire fragment in real time. 17 systems, it said quietly. Decades of expansion. Billions under Imperium authority. It turned to Thorn, undone by one human with markers and code. War's not about size, it's about leverage. Find the right pressure point, even small force creates big results. You are philosopher soldier. I'm a guy who read a lot of books between deployments. Vraxis studied the displays for a long moment. Fleet positions shifting, coalition advances, Imperium forces fragmenting without central coordination. Then it did something Thorn didn't expect. It laughed. The sound was alien, harmonic, but unmistakably laughter. Brilliant, Vraxis said. Absolutely brilliant. You did not defeat us with superior force. You made us defeat ourselves. It turned to its soldiers. Release him. They didn't move. Commander, one said, he is enemy combatant, has sabotaged. I gave order. Release him. Slowly the soldiers stepped back. Thorn rubbed his wrist where restraints had been. Not that I'm complaining, but why? Because you showed Kelthar, because you had power to kill thousands and chose not to. Because, Vraxis gestured to the displays, Because war is lost. Continuing costs more lives for no gain. And I am tired of sending soldiers to die for expansion that benefits only the powerful. It walked to the command console, began typing. I am transmitting to Imperium High Command, recommending withdrawal from occupied territories, recommending negotiation with coalition. It paused. Recommending we learn from human who taught us honor. They'll listen. Some will not. There will be internal conflict, factions. Vraxis's armored shoulders shifted, but isolation protocol has begun. Command cannot override remotely. They must accept reality. On the displays, more coalition ships appeared, striking supply lines, reclaiming orbital positions. The tide was turning. Hour 50. You should go, Vraxis said. Security teams not under my direct command will still hunt you. I cannot guarantee safety. Pod bay's back that way. Take access corridor 7, less patrolled. I will delay pursuit. Vraxis extended a manipulator appendage. Human gesture. Before you go, question. Thorn waited. Your daughter, in Air Force. What is her name, Emma? Emma, Vraxis repeated it carefully. When you see her, tell her. Tell her Vraxis says her father showed us what honor means, and that Imperium will remember. Thorn took the offered appendage, shook, alien hand in human hand. I'll tell her. He turned to leave. Flint, Thorn looked back. You were right, Vraxis said, about kids deserving better. My own offspring is in Educational Wing 8, learning history of Imperium expansion, learning glory of conquest. Its voice dropped. I want them to learn different lessons. Peace, building, cooperation. Then teach them. You've got the authority. I will try. Thorn nodded once, then left. Behind him, Vraxis began issuing commands, ordering civilian wing lockdowns, protecting the vulnerable as the station tore itself apart from within. One commander, choosing differently. Thorn ran through Corridor 7. His internal map showed pod bays ahead, emergency evac stations, his ticket out. But between him and escape, Ardent was coming apart. Not physically. Structurally, the station was sound. But the isolation protocol was cascading through every system. Bulkheads sealed, networks partitioned. What had been one unified organism became thousands of isolated cells. He navigated by instinct and memory, jumped gaps where floors had retracted, climbed where corridors had sealed. His suit reported oxygen at 58%. Time was running out. Hour 52. The pod bay appeared ahead. 50 cradles. 49 showed locked status. 1 showed green. Initialized. Waiting. Vraxis had unlocked it remotely. One last gift from an enemy turned something other than opponent. Thorn reached the pod. The door was open. Inviting. He stopped. Turned. Looked back down the corridor he'd run. Somewhere in this station, Zek was explaining to security why maintenance emergencies kept happening. Vraxis was trying to convince High Command to withdraw. Thousands of kids were learning mathematics and history unaware their world was changing. And Emma was at Forward Base Kepler, waiting for her father to come home. He climbed into the pod. The interior was cramped, designed for emergency evacuation, not comfort. Thorn strapped into the acceleration couch. His hands moved over controls made for Imperium physiology, but functional enough for human use. Systems green, navigation locked, trajectory calculated. He initiated launch sequence. The pod shuddered, clamps released, electromagnetic rails engaged. Through the small viewport, he saw Ardent falling away. The massive station that had seemed unconquerable was just metal and composite now. Just another structure in the black. The pod accelerated. G-forces pressed him into the couch, then weightlessness, then the vast silence of space. He was clear. His communicator crackled to life. Cordovan's voice. Flint, we're tracking your pod. Stealth retrieval inbound. ETAOM, 12 minutes. Copy. Mission complete. All markers planted. Code uploaded. Ardent isolated. We're seeing the effects. Imperium fleet coordination collapsed across 7 systems. Coalition forces advancing with minimal resistance. Pause. You did it. One man, you actually did it. Thorn looked through the viewport at the stars. Wasn't just me. Had help from unexpected places. Explain when you're aboard. For now, just, well done. The line went quiet. Thorn sat in the small pod, drifting, alone, exhausted in ways that went beyond physical. His suit display showed a message, encrypted, from Kelrax. He opened it. Human Flint, coalition sensors confirm isolation protocol successful. Military networks severed. Civilian systems protected. Educational wings secure. You trusted my code. I am grateful. One day when peace is real, I would like to meet you, to thank you properly. Until then, thank you. Thorne closed his eyes, just for a moment, just to rest. When he opened them, the stealth retrieval craft had matched velocity, airlocks aligning, connection protocols initiating. The pod shuddered as docking clamps engaged. A voice over the comm. Not Cordovan, someone new. Captain Thorne, this is Retrieval 7. We have positive lock. Transferring you to maincraft. Welcome home. Home, he'd been gone 54 hours. Felt like years. The airlock cycled. Thorne unstrapped and pushed himself through into the retrieval craft's interior. Gravity returned. His knees protested. Everything protested. A medic waited with a scanner. Sir, we need to check for... I'm fine, just tired. Sir, protocol requires do it fast. The medic ran the scanner, frowned at the readouts. Minor plasma burn on your left shoulder, some contusions, dehydration, exhaustion. Looked up. For someone who just infiltrated an enemy station alone, you're in remarkable shape. I'm old, we're harder to break. The medic smiled. I'll prepare a station for you, get some rest. We're 3 hours from Coalition Command. Thorne nodded, let himself be led to a small cabin, barely more than a bunk and a viewport. He sat heavily. Through the viewport, he could see Ardent, still intact, still operational, but dark in ways that had nothing to do with lighting. Isolated, alone, cut off from the empire it had coordinated. One station, billions of people, all because one old Marine had learned how to make fire from friction and how to keep moving when every instinct said, quit. His communicator buzzed. Personal channel, Emma's signature. His heart stopped. He accepted the call. Emma's face filled the small screen. 28 years old. Sarah's eyes, his jawline, wearing Air Force blues. Dad, her voice cracked. I just heard. Command briefed us. They said you. I'm fine, Em. Mission's done. I'm coming home. You infiltrated an Imperium command station. Alone at 58. Are you insane? Probably, but it worked. She laughed, cried, did both. I was so scared. When they said Earth sent one operator, I knew. I just knew it was you. And I thought... She couldn't finish. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for being you. She wiped her eyes. Mom would be proud. Scared out of her mind, but proud. Thorne thought of Sarah, of the wedding ring on a chain around his neck. Yeah, she would. They talked for 20 minutes. About nothing. Everything. Emma's posting, Thorne's survival school, avoiding the war, avoiding the mission, just a father and daughter reconnecting across the black. When the call ended, Thorne sat in silence. 3 hours to Coalition Command, then debriefing, then transport to Earth, then Montana, then the mountains and the survival school and teaching kids how to make fire. Normal life, if such a thing existed after this. He lay down on the bunk, closed his eyes. Sleep came fast, deep, dreamless. He woke to alarms, not emergency alarms, Coalition alert signals, something happening. Thorne stumbled to the main cabin. The crew was clustered around tactical displays. What is it? He asked. A tactical officer turned. Imperium High Command just transmitted. Galaxy-wide broadcast. On the screen, an Imperium official spoke. The translator provided context. Acknowledge operational disruption beyond acceptable parameters. Nexus Ardent isolation has severed strategic coordination. Continued expansion yields diminishing returns. Therefore, Imperium High Command announces immediate cessation of hostilities. Withdrawal from occupied coalition territories to commence within 72 hours. Negotiation teams will be dispatched to establish permanent borders and trade agreements. The bridge was silent. They're surrendering, someone whispered. Not surrendering, the tactical officer corrected. Withdrawing, accepting negotiated settlement. Because of Ardent. Because one man made their entire coordination network useless. The officer looked at Thorne. Because you showed them continuing was pointless. Thorne watched the broadcast. Saw Imperium forces beginning to pull back from occupied systems. Saw coalition ships moving into vacated positions. Saw the map of the galaxy rearranging itself. 17 systems, returned, liberated, saved. Because of markers and code. Because of one old Marine who knew how to make fire and how to keep moving. Hour 58. The war was over. Not with a final battle. Not with fleets clashing. Not with billions dead. With a broadcast, with withdrawal, with choices made differently. Thorne sat down heavily. It was done. He'd gone into Ardent expecting to die. expecting to complete the mission and maybe if he was lucky make it to an escape pod. But probably not. Probably just plant the markers and upload the code and fight until ammunition ran out, and then fight with his hands, and then die in some anonymous corridor far from home. Instead, he'd met an engineer who chose to help, a commander who chose honor, a defector who chose redemption. Instead, he was alive. The retrieval craft continued toward Coalition Command. Behind them, Ardent drifted in isolation. Ahead, the galaxy rearranged itself around new realities. And Garrett Thorne sat in silence, feeling 58 years in every joint, and thought about Emma and Sarah and the mountains of Montana and the 12-year-old girl who'd learned to make fire. Small choices. They added up. The Hall of Concordance had never been silent like this. High Arbiter Kelrax stood at the central projection, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting light from 17 systems that were no longer red, no longer occupied. The holographic displays showed Imperium forces withdrawing in coordinated retreat, pulling back to their core territories, abandoning the outer conquests, all because one human had walked into the heart of their empire and made it isolate itself. Casualty reports from the transition, a Vraxian delegate said, its bioluminescence pulsed cautious optimism. Minimal. Imperium forces withdrawing without scorched earth protocols. Civilian populations remain intact. Fleet engagements, Kelrax asked. 3 minor skirmishes. Coalition forces accepted Imperium surrender in all cases. The Korvathi delegates' mandibles clicked satisfaction. They are not fighting to the death. They are leaving. Kelrax studied the displays. Decades of war, billions dead, entire civilizations brought to the edge of extinction. And it was ending not with apocalyptic battle, but with broadcast announcements in orderly withdrawal. The chamber doors opened. General Silas Cordovan entered. Behind him, flanked by coalition security, walked Garrett Thorne. The assembled delegates turned, stared. This was the human, the one man, the operator who had done what fleets could not. Thorne looked tired. His EVA suit had been replaced with standard military fatigues. His shoulder bore a medical patch where plasma had burned through. He moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had been pushed past limits and was still finding its way back. But his eyes were clear, alert, present. High Arbiter Cordovan said formally. I present Captain Garrett Thorne. Mission status complete. All objectives achieved. Kelrax descended from the central platform. Approached Thorne. The human barely came up to his mid-torso, so small, so fragile by appearance. Yet this small, fragile being had brought an empire to its knees. Captain Thorne, Kelrax's harmonics carried frequencies of respect. My code, it functioned as promised. Perfectly. Civilian wings stayed protected. Military networks isolated. Something in Kelrax's exoskeleton shifted, relief. I have carried guilt for 15 years, for helping design Ardent, for contributing to the machinery of occupation. His crystalline structure darkened. You gave me redemption, allowed my engineering to protect instead of destroy. You earned your own redemption, Thorne said quietly. I just carried the code. The chamber erupted in harmonics, in clicks, in bioluminescent pulses, the alien equivalent of applause, of recognition. Thorne stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with attention. Perhaps, Kelrax said gently, we should proceed to debriefing. The captain requires rest. The debriefing room was smaller, more intimate. Just Cordovan, Kelrax, and a handful of coalition intelligence officers. Thorne sat, accepted water, drank half the container in one pull. Walk us through it, Cordovan said, hour by hour. So Thorne did. He described the approach. The debris field tumble, the thermite breach, moving through maintenance passages like a ghost, planting markers while billions lived their lives unaware. He described meeting Zek, the young engineer who'd chosen to help, who'd created distractions and pointed the way. He described the children, waving through viewports, playing with blocks. Just kids. He described Avraxis, the enemy commander who'd recognized honor, who'd let him go, who'd chosen to end the war rather than continue pointless bloodshed. The intelligence officers took notes, asked clarifying questions, wanted tactical details. But Kelrax asked different questions. What did you feel, the Talkesh asked, when you saw the children? Thorne was quiet for a moment. I felt scared, he said finally. Scared I'd make a mistake. Scared the code wouldn't work. Scared I'd kill kids whose only crime was being born on the wrong side. He looked at Kelrax. Then I felt determined, because if your code worked, I could save them, could save everyone. so I had to try. Even knowing failure meant your death, especially then. What's one old Marine compared to thousands of kids? Kelrax's exoskeleton pulsed deep blue. You understand now why I requested you specifically, why I believed only human could accomplish this. Because we're stubborn, because you value life, individual life, even enemy life. Kelrax's harmonics shifted. Most species calculate acceptable losses. You calculated how to avoid losses entirely. This is not military doctrine. This is compassion. Cordovan leaned forward. Captain Thorne's actions will be formally recognized. The Coalition is awarding you the Medal of Unity, first human recipient. Don't want it, Thorne said. Everyone looked at him. Sir, an intelligence officer said carefully, this is highest honor Coalition can bestow. I know what it is, still don't want it. Thorne stood, winced as his shoulder protested. I did the job's done, that's enough. Cordovan studied his old friend, saw the set of his jaw, the determination in his eyes. Understood, Cordovan said, but the medal's being awarded anyway. We'll send it to Montana. Fine, I'll hang it in the workshop. Kelrax made a sound that might have been laughter. The debriefing continued for another hour. Details, tactics, implications. Then Thorne was released to medical. The doctors fussed, checked his plasma burn, administered antibiotics, complained about dehydration and exhaustion, and operating at 58 years old like he was still 20. Thorne endured it with the patience of a man who'd sat through countless medical evaluations. You're cleared for travel, the lead doctor said finally, but I recommend 2 weeks rest before resuming normal activities. Sure. You're not going to rest, are you? Probably not, the doctor sighed. At least take it easy. Your body's been through significant stress. I've been through worse. That's not reassuring, Captain. Thorne almost smiled. Transport to Earth took 30 hours. Thorne slept most of it. Deep, dreamless sleep that his body demanded and finally received. When he woke, Earth filled the viewport. Blue and white and green. Home. The only planet humans had ever known until they'd reached for the stars. Still the most beautiful thing in the galaxy. The transport landed at Malmstrom, the same base he'd left from. Full circle. No ceremony waited. Cordovan had made sure of that, just standard military processing. Equipment return, final debrief, medical clearance. Then he was walking across the tarmac to his truck. Still parked where he'd left it, covered in dust. Battery dead from sitting. A young airman approached with jumper cables. Need a boost, sir. Appreciate it. They got the truck started. Thorne thanked the airman and drove. Highway 15 north, through Great Falls, past familiar landmarks. The Rocky Mountains rising in the west like old friends. He rolled down the windows, breathed air that tasted like home. Pine and dust in distance. 3 hours later, he turned onto the dirt road leading to his survival school. The mountains wore late autumn colors, aspen gold, pine green. Sky so blue it hurt to look at. The main lodge came into view, trucks parked outside, smoke from the chimney. He pulled in. The 12-year-old girl who'd learned to make fire saw him first. She ran over as he climbed out. Mr. Thorne, you're back. I'm back. Did you fight aliens? He knelt down, met her eyes. I solved a problem, same way you make fire. Patience, planning, using what you've got. Did you make fire in space? Something like that. She hugged him, quick and fierce, then ran to tell the other students. Thorne stood. His shoulder ached. His knees protested. 58 felt ancient in that moment, but he was home. The other instructors came out, asked questions he deflected, welcomed him back without pushing for details. That night, he sat on the lodge porch, stars wheeling overhead, the same stars he drifted among days before. But here they were peaceful, beautiful, not the backdrop to war. His phone buzzed, message from Emma. Landing tomorrow 1400. Can't wait to see you. He smiled, sent back, I'll pick you up. Drive careful. Then he sat in the dark, listening to wind in the pines, feeling the weight of what he'd done settle into something bearable. One mission, one man, one chance. And it had worked. Emma arrived the next day exactly at 1400. Punctual, military precision. Thorne waited at the small regional airport, watched her plane land, watched her disembark in civilian clothes, jeans and flannel. Sarah's smile, his stubborn jaw. She saw him and ran. They met in a hug that lasted, father and daughter, both warriors, both survivors. You look terrible, she said into his shoulder. You look beautiful. She pulled back, studied his face, saw the exhaustion, the plasma burn scar starting to form, the weight in his eyes. Let's go home, she said. They drove to the school. Emma talked about Kepler, about her squadron, about the moment she'd heard about the mission and known it was him. I was so scared, she admitted. Kept refreshing news feeds, watching casualty reports, praying your name wouldn't appear. I'm hard to kill. That's what scares me, because one day that won't be true. Thorne didn't have an answer for that. At the school, Emma settled into the guest cabin. Thorne showed her around, introduced her to students and staff. She fit in immediately, started teaching hand-to-hand techniques, sharing Air Force survival training. For 2 weeks they existed in that space, teaching, learning, being together. In the evenings they sat by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just being. The news is calling you the ghost of Ardent, Emma said one night. Coalition ambassadors want you to speak at the peace treaty signing. Not going. Figured. Emma was quiet. Then, Mom would be proud, you know that, right? Thorne touched the wedding ring on the chain around his neck. Yeah, I know. She'd also tell you to accept some recognition, to let people say thank you. She'd be wrong, Emma laughed. Stubborn old man, stubborn young woman. They sat in comfortable silence. On the last night before Emma had to return to duty, Thorne gave her something. A small wooden box, hand-carved. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a piece of ardent, a fragment of composite material he'd kept, scorched from thermite, scarred from plasma. What's this? Emma asked. Reminder that even the biggest, scariest things have weaknesses. That one person with conviction can make a difference. That you can face impossible odds and come out the other side. She held the fragment carefully. Thank you. When things get hard, when the mission seems impossible. Remember, your old man walked into the heart of an empire with 3 magazines and a wrench and walked back out. I'll remember. The next morning, Thorne drove her to the airport. They said goodbye without dramatics. Both warriors, both understanding that goodbye was temporary. Stay safe, kiddo. You too, Dad. She boarded her flight. Thorne drove back to the mountains alone. Months passed. Autumn turned to winter. Snow blanketed the survival school. Thorne taught students how to build cold weather shelters, how to find water under ice, how to stay alive when everything tried to kill you. The medal arrived, Coalition Medal of Unity, crystalline structure that refracted light like Kelrax's exoskeleton. Beautiful, meaningless to Thorne. He hung it in the workshop, between a wrench and a fire starter. News feeds stopped mentioning him. News stories took over. Treaty negotiations, Imperium internal reforms, coalition expansion. The galaxy moved on. Thorne moved on too. But sometimes late at night his communicator would buzz. Encrypted messages from unexpected sources. From Kelrax updates on ardent restoration, pictures of the educational wings, children learning in classrooms that had been protected by code and courage. From Zek brief notes. My offspring graduated primary education. Thank you for their future. From Vraxis longer messages about Imperium reforms, about resistance from Old Guard, about choosing to build instead of conquer, about teaching young what honor means. Thorne read them all, sometimes responded, sometimes just to archive them. Evidence that small choices rippled outward. That one mission had changed more than fleet positions. A year after the mission, the peace treaty was signed. Coalition and Imperium formally recognized borders, established trade routes, created joint councils for dispute resolution. No more war, no more conquest, not perfect peace. Never perfect, but better than what came before. Thorne watched the signing on a small screen in the workshop, saw Kelrax representing Coalition, saw Vraxis representing Imperium Reformists, saw them shake hands, or the alien equivalent. His communicator buzzed. Message from Cordovan. They're asking for you, one more time. Come speak at the commemoration. Thorne typed back no, but tell them I'm proud of what they built. Tell them to keep building. You sure? Positive. I've got 12 kids learning shelter construction. That's more important. Stubborn Marine. Retired stubborn Marine. He put the communicator away, went back to teaching. That evening, the 12-year-old girl who'd learned to make fire a year ago showed him something. A bow drill she'd carved herself. Perfect balance. Precise measurements. I practiced all year, she said proudly. Can make fire in under a minute now. Thorne examined her work, nodded approval. Good craftsmanship. Your skills grown. Because you taught me. Because you practiced. I just showed you the method. She beamed, and Thorne thought, this is the work that matters, not medals, not recognition, teaching the next generation how to survive, how to persist, how to make fire when everything's cold and dark. 5 years after the mission, Coalition and Imperium announced Joint Exploration Initiative, combined fleet, mixed crews, pushing into uncharted space together. Vraxis commanded one ship, the CNS Unity, named for the medal Thorne had hung in his workshop. Kelrax served as chief science officer. Zek worked in engineering. Enemies become colleagues. Colleagues become friends, all because one human had shown them a different way. Thorne read about the launch on the news, felt satisfaction, pride, not in himself, in them, for choosing to grow. His survival school had expanded, 2 locations now, hundreds of students annually, teaching skills that kept people alive and gave them confidence. Emma visited when she could, brought her own students sometimes. Joint training exercises, Air Force and civilian. Military and mountain. The girl who'd learned to make fire was 18 now, teaching younger kids herself, carrying forward what she'd learned. Cycles, generations, knowledge passed down. That's what endured. 10 years after the mission, Thorne was 68. Gray had conquered his hair. His knees complained constantly. But his hands were steady, his mind sharp, his purpose clear. He stood on the lodge porch, watching sunrise over the Rockies, coffee steaming in the cold air. His communicator buzzed. Unknown signature. But coalition encryption. He accepted. An alien face appeared. Young, humanoid but distinctly other. Large eyes, scaled skin. Captain Garrett Thorne, the alien asked. That's me. My name is Keth. I am from the Shavara Collective. We recently made contact with Coalition, learned of your mission, learned that one human ended war without destroying. And we face similar situation, conflict with neighboring species, escalation. The alien's large eyes blinked. We wondered, could you advise? Thorne was quiet for a moment. I'm not a diplomat, he said finally, not a strategist, just an old mechanic. You were more than that. Will you help? Thorne looked at the mountains, at the school, at the life he'd built from simple principles. Survive, adapt, persist, protect. Send me your information, he said. I'll look at it, see if there's anything I can offer. Thank you. He ended the call, stood in the cold morning, breathing frost, feeling 68 in his bones, but also feeling something else. Purpose, the knowledge that experience mattered. That age brought wisdom if you paid attention to lessons. The galaxy was big, problems were endless, but solutions existed. Sometimes all it took was one person willing to try. The day Garrett Thorne died, he was 73 years old, not in combat, not on mission, not in space, in the mountains, teaching a class of teenagers how to navigate by stars. His heart simply stopped. Decades of stress in combat and pushing limits finally caught up. He died quickly, painlessly, surrounded by students in mountains and sky. Emma arrived 2 days later, arranged the funeral, simple, quiet, the way he'd wanted. No military honors, no coalition delegations, just family and friends and students who'd learned from him. They buried him in the mountains, overlooking the valley where his school stood, where he'd taught thousands how to make fire and build shelter and persist. The headstone was simple: Garrett, Flint Thorne, 2968 to 3041. One teacher, father, Marine. He made fire when everything was dark. But the story didn't end there, because Thorne's legacy wasn't in his death, it was in what he'd built, who he'd taught, what he'd shown was possible. The survival school continued, run by former students, teaching the methods Thorne had refined, the principles he'd lived by. Emma took command of a coalition ship, CNS Persistence, named for the quality her father embodied. Kelrax wrote History of the Ardent Mission, published across the galaxy, required reading in coalition academies. Vraxis became Imperium's ambassador to coalition, working toward lasting peace. Zek designed stations where civilian and military networks were always separated, where children were always protected. Thorne Protocol, they called it. And across the galaxy, when conflicts arose, species remembered that one human had walked into impossible odds and found the solution no one else saw. Remembered that sometimes the answer wasn't bigger weapons or larger armies. Sometimes it was one person with conviction and a wrench. 20 years after Thorne's death. Emma Thorne, now Admiral. Emma Thorne stood in the Hall of Concordance, the same chamber where her father's mission had begun. She'd been invited to speak. Commemoration of the Ardent mission. 30 years since her father had changed the galaxy. She stood at the central podium, addressed assembled delegates from 50 species. My father would hate this, she began. He'd say the mission was done. Move on. Teach the next generation. Quiet laughter from the assembly. But I'm here because the next generation needs to know, needs to understand what's possible when you refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable. She activated the display, showed Ardent, showed the mission timeline, showed the cascade that ended a war. Garrett Thorne wasn't special, she continued. He was a mechanic, a teacher, a stubborn old man who didn't know how to quit. What made him extraordinary was that he tried when everyone else said it was impossible. She paused. Let that settle. He taught me to make fire, taught thousands of students to survive. His lesson was simple: use what you have. Stay persistent. Protect the vulnerable. That's not military doctrine. That's human nature at its best. Emma looked at the faces, scales and chitin and features she couldn't name, all listening, all learning. The galaxy still faces threats, still has conflicts. But we also have Thorne's example. We have proof that one person can make a difference, that small choices add up, that courage and compassion aren't weakness. She closed her presentation. My father made fire when everything was dark. We honor him by keeping that flame alive, by teaching others, by choosing to solve problems instead of surrender to them. The assembly rose, universal gesture of respect. Emma stood quiet, feeling her father's presence, knowing he'd be rolling his eyes at the ceremony, but proud of the message. After Kelrax approached, old now, his crystalline exoskeleton dulled with age. Your father would be proud, the Talkesh said. He'd tell me to stop talking and start teaching. Then let us teach. Kelrax's harmonics warmed. His methods live on, in academies, in training, in every species that learned from his example. Emma nodded. Small choices, they added up. On Earth, in the mountains of Montana, Thorne's survival school still stood. Expanded now, campus instead of single lodge. Students from a dozen species learned side by side, making fire, building shelter, persisting when everything said quit. In the main hall, a plaque hung, simple, direct, Garrett Flint Thorne. He proved that one person can change everything. Now go, prove it again. And every day they did. Small choices, individual courage, persistence in the face of impossible odds. Humanity's gift to the galaxy, Thorne's legacy, the fire that never went out.